Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick, a spiritual life coach and your host of Her Conversations Tools for the Awakening. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality, and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal, but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations will speak to your spirituality, sensuality, and soul. Listen to their stories and hear how they are in service to the world, and let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. For December on Her Inspirations, which is the sister podcast to this platform, I have created a 5-week series, Flow into 2024. Each episode this month will have a new focus that will build on the previous week, so that by week 5 at the end of December and days before the new year, you're ready and primed to flow into 2024. I've also created weekly journaling sheets so that you can go deeper into each of the episodes. So far, we've had Essence, which is a review of 2023, and Desire, looking at what you want for 2024. Still to come in the series is Evolve, really focusing on who you need to become in order to attain your goals. Foundation, really laying in the seeds of what you need to succeed, and then Create, when you flow into 2024. So if you'd like to be part of the conversation and to receive everything, the links are in the show notes of the podcast and for you to join the mailing list. My guest this week is Liberated Self Love Coach Linda Sanderville. She helps women get unstuck from self-sabotage and welcome in greater abundance and emotional freedom into their personal and professional lives. Her approach centers on essential skills that are rooted in self-love and combine subconscious reprogramming with practical wisdom, particularly through her signature rolling group program, Yourself Liberated. During our conversation, Linda speaks about what self-love really means and how it profoundly transforms our experience, in particular if we feel called into a role of leadership. So as always, I begin by asking my guest, Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel that higher energetic resonance?
Carol, thinking about this question, I feel that higher energetic resonance almost every single time, like 99.9% of the time, when I am self-led, right? I'm in my self energy in a moment where I am working with somebody else to help them interact with and come to know and love on the different parts that they have inside of them, right? Mm-hmm. So that they can also then be more self-led. There's just something about that kind of parts work that's just so grounding in the moment. And I can't be anywhere else but now. Mm-hmm. And neither can they, right? So it becomes this invitation to be so present, but not in a way that's forced. It's a way that feels like you kind of get a hint of it, and then all of a sudden you're tapped fully into it. Like you fall into the ocean of presence and now and just being, right? You can't do, you have to be. And so I love that. I love connecting with other women in that way and helping them to dive into their own self energy. It's the most magical place to be, right? When you're in it, they're in it, you're together, like it's amazing.
Good for you. Good for you for creating that. Good for you for, and just so beautifully said as well. Before we go further in, Linda, just please tell a little bit of your story and how you got to be doing the work that you're doing right now.
This story, I have to say, it begins with my mother, because so many of our stories do. My parents were immigrants to the US from West Africa, and there's just something about that immigrant mentality that I've actually gained so much from. I really do attribute a lot of my my search for excellence, my search for personal growth. I attribute a lot of that to sort of that dynamic of just being a young person who's moving to a whole new world and like creating a whole new life for yourself, right? Like I feel like that downloaded through my parents into me, even though I haven't emigrated anywhere, or emigrated anywhere, I should say. But in that transition, my mother has since shared with me how she gave away so much of herself and denied so much of herself to not only build this life here from scratch after already having a life elsewhere, but settling for things, tolerating things, putting everyone else first before herself in a way that cost her happiness and really her health. So she ended up getting diagnosed with cancer not long after I returned home from graduate school. And it was very shocking. I mean, at first they thought she might have that she was like stage 4 and there was really nothing to be done. Western medicine actually couldn't do anything for her. So she ended up just kind of going back to her old knowledge of what she had back in Ghana, herbs and all kinds of things, working on her stress, letting things go that she hadn't dealt with before. But she has told me so many times since that point that she knows that she got sick like that, in part because her system was weakened from just years of excessive sacrifice, right? Years of kind of working hard for everybody else and not taking care of herself. And whenever she would see these patterns in me, she'd be like, Linda, don't do it. Don't do it. Learn from me. You don't want that. It's going to come back to haunt you. And I couldn't hear her at first. And part of it was just the presence of mortality. Like, wow, my mom might not be here. I don't even know what to do with that information. We don't have like the cleanest, most glorious relationship with each other as it is. And this just felt like it complicated things. But I knew that, wow, life is so much shorter than I ever could have imagined. And I started to live from that place, which sometimes is helpful, but I think for me, it actually intensified everything to a level that was not, right? I had to do everything quickly. I had to achieve quickly. I had to travel to all the places. I had to do this, that. Like, what I really needed was to slow down, but that was the last thing I wanted to do. So that's why I say that my story and my work started with my mom, because it's a constant unlearning for me as her daughter to not end up following those same patterns that feel so enticing at times, especially for me being someone who I do love achieving. I do love having goals. I am a high performer, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not like that's a curse. I just need to know how to work with that in a way that doesn't then rob me of the things that actually mean more to me than just the achievements and the accolades and the titles and the degrees and right, all that stuff. I want to be there for my boys. I want to look them in the eye every day and concentrate just on them, not just the work that I have to do or the next goal I have to accomplish. I want to connect with my husband and make sure we have that loving, connected relationship. So that's where I just know that there's so much importance in like, how do we really live a life, right? And the ways that matter to us, the ways that are going to matter to us at the end of our life. And I want to help other women who have this same battle to navigate this more easily, because there is a lot at stake, right? Not just our own health, but our relationships, our connections with our children as they get older, our romantic life, everything. Yeah.
Wow. I just love the way that you lay out your story and your information, your perspective. It's like, as a songwriter, I'm always just hearing the poetry when people are just giving poetry, and I'm just like, so like just listening to that. But yeah, thank you for sharing. And what's always interesting in all the years that I've done this podcast is that when I ask this question, or when I ask those first 2 questions of my guests, is, one, it gets them into the space where they're feeling that high energetic resonance. Yes. But then when they tell their story always comes from a very real place. It comes from a place of confronting something that happens in our lives, but then turning it into something that then shifts them and awakens within them a responsibility almost, because they've been given an awareness of it, because so many people go through stuff and then don't actually see that as hard as these things are, they are an invitation for us to really see what it is and why it is each one of us are here. And our purpose is always in what we experience within our lives. I'm seeing that in myself. I'm seeing it in others all the time. If you, and especially when clients have come into me and saying, oh, I need to do something with my life. What's my purpose? Like it's, this thing that's out there, on the foothills of the Himalayas in India or on the rice fields in Bali. Like I've been to both of those places and I enjoyed them immensely. But by no means did I find my purpose out there. Do you know what I mean? The journeys and kind of doing the checklist of the things that you do when you're in this space. It's like, you've been to Bali, you went to India, like, yeah, we did that. And you do that because, I think it's worthy of that, taking yourself out into those different environments, because in taking yourself out into those different environments, one, you experience it so you can talk about it, but also then you realize what part of you is you, as opposed to what part of you is where you're at and where you've always been, because you just kind of, you blend into it. It becomes automatic. And then when you're out there in the middle of nowhere where, no one speaks your language, no one looks like you, it's all completely strange. It's like, well, okay, who am I? And sometimes who you are is a little bit more than the game that you were playing back home, but it's not really that much difference. It's just kind of realer version out there as well. So, I don't regret those journeys, and I met some amazing friends that I'm friends to this day, so it was worthy of going there, and also seeing, spirituality and the levels and the what it is and what it ain't, basically, based on when people go out to these places, but what's real also from my perspective. When did you really start to open up your work? And was it when you went and did those trips, or was it you just realizing, hang on, I can turn this into something, and I want to turn this into something?
That's a great question, because it feels like it's grown in stages, all along the way. I would say that time period with my mother confronting that mortality, her trying to negotiate that for herself, that did spark a pretty big leap in terms of where I was going to go with my work and with my just my mindset around these things. I do think yes, those travels, and I'm like, did I pass you by on some of those foothills in the Himalayas? I wonder if we walked by each other.
Because it's like I've actually met friends who, when I was in India, 2017, Muji was out there, and we actually went, and she was sitting in the same room as me when we worked it out. And I'm like, I was there, like, what day did you go? Yeah. And she was at the front and I was sitting in the back, and we worked it out. We were there and we're friends now. But we didn't meet until we actually met in Mallorca on another retreat. I've since met many people who were in either Bali or India in the times that I was in Bali and India.
Yeah. I do think that, that sort of setting that appointment to go meet with yourself, right, in a foreign land or a foreign city or whatever it is for you. That's so real, because you do kind of get down to the bones of it, and you're like, okay, hello, it's nice to meet you, right? To yourself. But I think it progressed from there. I had this amazing boss at one of my first jobs out of grad school, in this similar time period, with my mother and with the traveling, and seeing her light, her spark there was something about that too that lit a fire under me. Like, wow, like that's the kind of leader I want to be. So many people have, terrible bosses or management that they're like, ugh, I could do it so much better than them. Oh my gosh, how'd they get in that position? But she was one I was like, oh, she was built for this. And it wasn't just that she had the degrees and she was Dr. So-and-so and all this. I was like, those things just sort of complemented what already was there. She could have never gone to school, done any of the things, and she would still be this natural leader. And I loved that. And I loved growing under her into my leadership and being empowered by her, because she would just be like, oh, you have that idea? Go for it. I know that you can do it. And I could, but at the time I needed someone to say, of course you can.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And to show me that level of just support and belief. And so just seeing the power of a powerful, positive, grounding leadership, right? Someone who is so confident and so grounded in who she is. She's not threatened by anybody else's excellence. In fact, she welcomes it like, yes, grow, right? Glow, sister. Like there was no fear in that, right? And sometimes you have leadership where they need to be the star all the time, and they're not really all that confident in who they are. And so it comes out in how they treat other people, but she didn't have any of that baggage. And that was just so attractive to me to grow into something like that. So I think the joining of learning to meet myself and then also, weaving that into what it means to be a leader, like that, there's something about that intersection. And even just with my faith and spiritual practices, like seeing how when you have those two things woven tightly together and you have someone who is emotionally healthy and rooted, it's transformative, like what they can do for in their families, what they can do in their community and an organization. Those are the kind of folks who the wake they leave behind them, right? The influence and impact they leave behind them, it just shows. People are like, oh, wow,
Yeah.
that's the mark of so and so. It's really, it's like magic. And so I think it's been a steady progression over time as I've kind of witnessed other people who have some of that energy as well. And as I've come to embrace more of my own authority because I've gotten more comfortable with being self-led and self-directed. So, and it still progresses to this day, right? Like I'm still growing, I'm still learning. We're recording this in the month of October 2023, and it's been a crazy month. I mean, like anything that could go wrong has gone wrong. Like I have stories to tell, but how I've grown through that and the way that I am responding to that is just so different because I have progressed so much as an individual. And so it's a ride. It's a ride for sure.
I
I
love
hope I
it.
answered your question. I know I'm going off on tangents.
Doesn't matter. Like tangents are fine. I wanted to because two tangent thoughts came off that as well. And one was like when you're talking about leadership, what is it that you think, and this is like maybe opinion or what you've witnessed that facilitates leaders that are not necessarily leading in a way that is benefiting anyone who's kind of, like you say, following in their wake. Like we know what powerful, confident leaders are and what it's like to be in their presence. Equally, there are many people out there who are in this space and they're operating from spaces that are not necessarily pure and helpful, but yet they amass around them a big following, like something that looks really good on the outside, and depending on how closely you get pulled into the wake of that, then you'll really see what's going on behind the scenes, because sometimes there's a lot of unhealed leaders out there. Why do you think it manages to elevate itself that way? Because you would think the energy of the inauthenticity would just like not allow it to rise, right? And yet it does. You go to an event and there's someone running it and it all looks good on paper and, social media and the posters. And then you're there and then you're like, this isn't really so great.
Oh,
And so like you can see it, and so you kind of like extract yourself from it. But not everyone does. And some people are really pulled into it and invested in it, and sometimes for a long time, and also believe that they are gaining some sort of, what are they gaining from it? If you can see that this is not right, and there are so many that are pulled into something that is not stable. And like you say, someone who's put themselves in a position of leadership who doesn't really want anyone to like ride next to them. They're not really uplifting anyone, that kind of thing. It's like, what is facilitating that? Is it just the fact that there are people like blindly feeding into them?
I could write a book on what you're talking about right now. Maybe I will.
I mean, I think it needs to be spoken about a little bit more as well,
Yes.
to kind of, highlight a situation, and then they've got the choice. You're not just walking blindly into a situation, at least, like, you were forewarned, and if you continue to proceed, then fine. But if you don't know any better, you kind of get caught up in the slipstream of yeah, it's cool, and then
There's a number of different angles. I'll start with something I mentioned a little bit earlier because it can further expand, and for anyone who doesn't quite know what I'm, talking about there with the self-led energy. So I'll start there, right? There's an issue of giving our trust away too easily. And I think that often happens when we are not grounded in that self-led energy, right? And that self is that, that higher energetic resonance, right? It's that innate wisdom that we all carry, right? No one has dibs on that. The innate wisdom that we all carry, and that we can either sort of silence over time. I wouldn't say completely because that doesn't ever go away, but we can ignore it so much that we're no longer familiar to know, like, oh, that's that voice that I should actually pay attention to, right? And then for some of us who are investing in and knowing ourselves, growing that self-trust, that voice gets louder, quote unquote, because we just are paying more attention to it, right? So if we ignore that, then we are more susceptible to being caught up, like you're saying, in the influence and the, like, oh, the visuals of whatever that looks like for someone who seems very impressive, because they are coming from a part of them that is not self-led. It's led by something else, right? It's kind of domineering. It takes up a lot of space. It doesn't want to share the stage with anybody else. That's not true self. True self is not threatened by other people's light. That's how you know. Like, if you come across someone who is threatened by your light or somebody else's, just give them room, back away, but find somewhere else, right? Walk a different path because it's not going to get any better. Right. You can't pull them out of that because people need to decide that for themselves. We all have that personal choice and that personal responsibility. So I cannot decide that for somebody else who I see that is incredibly unhealthy, incredibly selfish, self-centered, all about their image. I cannot solve that for them. Now, if they know that they have a problem, they want to work on that. Okay, yeah, let's work together. I can't fix that for them. And neither can anybody listening to this. Right. So that's how you know they cannot tolerate sharing the stage with anybody else's light. And when you are giving yourself that room to pay attention to your inner wisdom, you will get hints about that. And we have all ignored hints from our true selves. We've all done it. I've done it. I did it this week. I did it probably yesterday, right? Like, this is not a judgment like, oh, I'm higher than thou. You guys aren't listening to yourselves enough. We all do it to different extents. We just get better at not doing it so much, right? And certainly trying not to do it in cases where it's going to have major repercussions, right? In terms of like who you marry or who you go into business partnership with, things that can really mess up your life. You try not to make those mistakes. And if you do, then you just, you try not to repeat them. Right. But I think there's often a lack of self-trust and self-leadership within the people who end up being attracted to those kinds of magnetic, kind of dominating folks. And that's so unfortunate because they're the most vulnerable to really being hurt by those types of, personality-based leadership kind of styles. And that's just a shame. It breaks my heart. It really, really breaks my heart. And I think the people who are inhabiting those roles, they have their own wounds. Like you said, unhealed. I think you said it right there. It's unhealed. And so the natural magnetism that they had is used to further their own interests. That's the best way I can put it. It's not used to the greater good or to improve the lives of other humans. It's really primarily for themselves. And if you pay attention and you let yourself pay attention, you'll be able to tell. I've come across those folks recently. I mean, you can tell.
I think the shock is always maybe the first one. And maybe it's your idea of what, spirituality or what this area of interest is all about and who the people are and what you expect them to be. They're not going to be like an ascended master walking on the face of the clean of everything. There's going to be humanity there. And there's going to be somebody who ideally is realizing that they have to, keep evolving, keep cleaning up, keep checking what's happening around them. But sometimes it can just be so way off that it's, I don't know. I get instances of it now where I'm just like, okay, that's not for me. I'm just gonna like just walk backwards through the bush. And you've ever seen that meme where
with just Homer Simpson?
Yeah, they just like, I'm not even gonna make a noise about it. I'm just gonna edge out because this isn't helping people. And also I've realized that trying to warn everybody or kind of like point things out isn't helpful either, because it's not going to come across in the way that you're trying to make it come across. It's just going to sound like sour grapes or something else, or people are going to read it completely wrong, where you're just like, no, I'm witnessing some stuff. I'm also like in touch with what I'm feeling now, because I've kind of done this thing a couple of times now, and I'm recognizing the pinches that I got before that I ignored before, and now I don't want to waste like another 6 months or a year trailing around in the wrong space just because I thought it was good and everyone's like on this wave at the moment. So then when it comes to being self-led and self-love, this is like your sphere of excellence. Again, when we talk about trends and popular things, I don't think anyone's really talking like deeply and authentically about what that actually means, like self-love, more so than the hashtag or whatever it looks like online. But the deep work of self-love, and where it starts or where it can start, and where it evolves to, and all the things that it involves.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to. Thank you for letting me talk about it.
That's why you're here.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey. So, self-love, I think, obviously I know myself, so I forget, but to let your listeners know that part of my background is that I am a licensed therapist, right? So I've been doing this work in terms of psychotherapy and healing, mainly around anxiety, depression, and trauma for years now, years and years. And so that is my background. That's my expertise and my training. So when I talk about these things, I'm not just sort of like pulling stuff out of my head, right, or out of my bottom. I don't know. It's grounded in actual problems that people face and experience every day. I mean, depression, anxiety, these things are really endemic across like most of the world's societies at this point, unfortunately. So when I'm talking about self-love, I really mean it in terms of I'm talking about something radical. I'm talking about something like life-saving, right? Not let's go pour some tea and let's rub our feet, like and you might do those things. I actually love doing both of those things, and I do those things most days. But it's not as an act of like, oh, look at me, isn't this cute? It's because that just happens to work for me, and there's sensory, right, things involved, and giving to myself and being able to receive comfort and pleasure and all those things that are really important. And that's part of the whole piece of self-love. But it's really an effort to make sure that we feel whole as human beings, and we are operating, right, like we're taking actions, we're making decisions, we're communicating with other people from a place that is grounded in the fact that our worth is not, it can't be questioned. It can't be questioned, right? Our worth is just there. Our worth is a fact, right? And so when you have that, like everything else that you do that comes from that place just looks different, right? It just feels different, it lands differently, So that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like mental health, emotional health, taking care of ourselves physically, tending to our relationships, because we are social creatures, whether we're introverts or extroverts or ambiverts. We need community, right? Tending to all these aspects of ourselves. that's what I mean when I'm talking about self-love, right? It's all of that.
Mm.
And so, and when it comes to integrating that with self-leadership, well, your true self, your innate wisdom, that core part of you knows that you have inherent worth. It knows that you came with gifts to give. It knows that you have a purpose. Like you said in your spiritual coaching that you do, folks are like, how do I find it out there? How do I go get it? And you're like, nope, it's not, that's not what it is. Like it's there already, actually. It's
Mm.
in you.
Mm.
And so I think that self-leadership ties in with self-love, because when you are grounded in your own worth, it also makes it so much easier for you to see the worth of other people. The
Mm.
more I have gotten confident in how valuable I am, it doesn't make me more narcissistic. It actually makes me like, wow, like literally every individual I pass by has something that no one else will ever have. That's crazy, right? Like it just makes you like tune into like the amazingness of every human, or at least the amazing potential of
Right.
every human. So I think that's part of it, because if you are grounded in that self-love as a female leader, you can see people for how valuable they are, and you approach them that way. And
Mm.
actually you can draw that back out of them even more than they maybe were even expecting. And suddenly they're feeling like, oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
like I have capacity. I have something to offer, right? And they're believing in themselves now even more because of that, the wake again that you leave behind you, that
Mm.
makes people feel more empowered and more confident and just more inspired to
Mm.
be themselves. So that's what self-love can do, right? That's just one aspect of what self-love can do. And obviously I talk about it mainly in terms of how we lead. Um, but I want to be clear that all of us are leading in some way,
Mm.
right? I'm talking about those who kind of identify as leaders and things like that, but we're all leading in some way, because every one of us has someone who is watching. You all have someone who's watching you, who's taking notes based on what you're doing. They may not tell you, right? Maybe it's your little sister and they would die before they told you, but they're still like, but how does she do that? Oh, okay. Well, if she can do it, maybe I can. Everyone has someone who's taking notes on how they're walking and how they're moving through the world. I do think it's actually responsibility of every human being to be self-led and to be rooted in self-love, because you benefit yourself, you benefit everybody else.
I'm with you on that. I think where we're at now in the world, with everyone so scattered and so
Yeah.
distracted, and that's not to say that there aren't things that demand our attention and our care and our thoughts and our thinking about how to solve all the things that are going on, but also the ramping up of the anxiety and the depression comes from a lack of being with yourself, and looking out to try and fit into the versions of events, or the game that you should be playing, or the way that you should be running your life, and no one ever hits the marks that they're supposed to. Like I don't know, maybe someone does, but like it's not. You can't set up one path and then it be for the majority. So for the few people who manage to kind of like pretzel themselves into that and kind of make it work for them, there's going to be like the vast majority that just feel like they're not doing it right, they're not being it, they don't know who they are, they're not tall enough, short enough, fat enough, thin enough, like whatever, like we're supposed to be at this point in time. The goal keeps moving, so you're never going to win by trying to chase this external thing. So it's by, like say, by moving back into yourself and like seeing who you are and what you've been through. I mean, that's what's been the biggest of awarenesses for me, is just like, hang on a minute. Even though I always went my own way, I realized as well that I spent a lot of time chasing my dreams. It's like I'm going after my dreams, I'm chasing my dreams. And just the wording alone took it out of me into the world, because it was like, when I get my dreams, then I'll show them. It was kind of like, I will attain my own success based on other people's approval of the fact that she did it amazing, well done, you got there in the end, as opposed to, no, this is what I'm doing and it'll take as long as it takes. So you like kind of bring it into yourself and work it from the inside out, and it changes the way that it sets up for you. And I was doing a masterclass with a group last week as well, and we did a meditation, and something really came up for me that just, it was like kind of like the door came round and slammed me in the back of my head. And it was just saying, like, even though I've had to make a choice for varying different reasons, for my own growth, really, to have distance, physical distance between me and my family in order to maintain the connection, I was still maintaining some of their beliefs, i.e., that there's only so far you can go and all the rest of it. That little thing was like, oh, so even though we're not around each other all the time, I might as well be sitting in the room listening to what you're telling me, because I'm still agreeing with it by the way that I'm still doing certain things. It was, again, for me to like take another snip to self means really cutting away from any kind of unconscious contracts or any kind of beliefs that I'm still holding on to, because self means sometimes you have to pull yourself away from the group that you're connected to, the culture that you're connected to, the family that you're connected to, in order to find who you are. And then you can show up with them later when you've got it really rooted and grounded in that. So for me, that was a real realization of sometimes self really means self, like on your own, and really kind of cut away from that and allowing yourself to find the strength in that self. This is what I'm, learning from just this little kind of like slap of awakening that I had over the week, where it was just like, okay, we just really need to like even cut out the little tendrils of stuff that I was still agreeing with, I didn't even realize I was still agreeing with, and really build the self away from that, especially seeing that I am charged with changing the narrative of the family. And that means like planting the tree in a completely different garden and then growing from there, then just seeing, like you say, there's always people watching you. There are lots of little nieces and nephews in the room when everyone's talking about Carol, but like going, but what's Carol? Carol doesn't look unhappy. Carol doesn't look crazy. What, and just noticing, because now I can see that they're coming of age where they're leaving the fold and going out into the world now and trying to work out the world. And then they'll start to get perspective. Things are going to start to drop in. It's going to make a bit more sense to them. And I feel the responsibility of that in a way of like, I know that when I was younger, I'd look up at the next generation of family and see how they were playing the game and see who used to talk about so-and-so in a certain way. But then when you get older and you're kind of like level to their age, you're like, I understand them now. What was being said from a point of view of something else. They had to step away. They realized to be themselves, they had to like literally step away. It happened a few times, like members of the family just went missing. People can't find them. And now I realize, like, okay, I understand why they went. Because before, when everyone's still in the room, like, yeah, they just went off. It's like, I understand why they did. I get it now. That's what sometimes self means, like literally cutting off the whole thing.
Yeah, no, well, I'm nodding. I mean, you can see me, obviously our listeners can't, but I'm nodding vehemently because I know exactly what you're talking about, Carol. It's hard because no matter what is going on in the world at this particular time, when whoever's listening to this right now is listening, there's always going to be sort of demands to engage and to talk out about, or have an opinion about, or declare something. It doesn't really matter what's going on, because that's always the case. And I think we just don't give enough, we don't give people enough space to let them kind of go internal, right? We don't allow that for some reason. We're so like anti people taking time to themselves. I don't know what that's about, but really, if more of us did that, like you're talking about, we could find our way back to ourselves and be way more authentic, and stop making declarations about things that really we probably don't even really understand.
Right.
How about that? But anyway, I think I think that gets downplayed. Like the value of that is downplayed in our world these days. But I think part of just to give a possible tool for those listening who are like, okay, how do I get more of that? Carol got slapped in the back of the head with the door. How do I get slapped in the back of the head with that door and have some more realizations? And I think one of the ways that has been really powerful and consistently effective for me is definitely doing subconscious work and using hypnosis. It was so effective that I ended up like going back and getting trained in it. And I was already like a trained clinical therapist for many years. And I was like, I need to know how to help other people using this tool because it is so powerful. And combining, doing hypnosis with someone who is trained and ethical to get in touch with the inner parts of yourself, right? All these different sides of yourself that have all these different fears and opinions and things that they want you to pay attention to, getting to know those parts of yourself can be so eye-opening, and it can help you to identify some of the contracts that you may have with yourself, like Carol's talking about, the contract that she had with her family, even though she was miles away. When you get to know your own inner parts, you'll meet parts of you that sound just like your uncle, but sound just like that teacher from elementary school, sound just like that coach when you were in high school. Like that first boss you had that seemed to just hate you. Like you will find many times pieces of those former relationships inside of you, right? Because there are parts of you that kind of took on that belief, took on that idea, took on those fears or those prejudices, whatever it was, and then sort of internalized them. And so when you do that kind of subconscious work and you really delve into the parts with non-judgment, right, with an openness and a curiosity, you can come to unearth a lot of that, and then you can help those parts of you from that true self, right, capital S self energy. You can help those parts of you to shed those old beliefs, that old baggage, and take on something new, take on a new identity, take on new beliefs and hopes and dreams. So that's a great way to kind of engage some of what you were sharing about earlier. And I just wanted to offer that as an option for those who want to dive into that kind of work.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. Thank you. Because this will kind of play into it as well when we're talking about self, is then self-sabotage, being aware of why we're doing it, or like you said, like sometimes what is sabotaging it is the voice of the person that you've embodied, that isn't even really you, but you kind of feel that you've made them part of yourself that are running part of your life and quite in a quite strong way also. How do you speak to self-sabotage and like help to guide people through, or to recognize that it's them, that like that unconscious part of themselves that they think might be, society or that person or this person or that thing, but it's actually a part of themselves that is keeping them in a certain space, and not to apportion blame and just go into like kind of some kind of like victim self
right,
not that kind of thing, but into just, I think it's always empowering to find out that you're the one that's creating something. I always see it from that point of view, instead of going, oh, what do you mean it's me doing it? I'm like, yeah, it's you doing it. So it means that you can undo it, as opposed to trying to like, manipulate the external factor that you think is dragging you down and turning your life into whatever you think it is. How do you guide people through their self-sabotaging behaviors and actions?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. And you set that up so well, because I think it can feel very blaming, and I understand. I understand why, right? And part of why, you and I are talking about like all these kind of aspects of self today is exactly what you just said, right? These are the things that we can control. There are so many things in our world, in our life, over the course of our life, that we won't be able to control, right? Like we broke our garage door the other day, right? Like it was just like, okay, well, now we need to fix it. I don't enjoy that, but that is what I can control. I can control if I decide to fix it. The fact that it was broken, like, but I think, it's not about assigning blame, because and I talk about this a lot because, my perspective is very sociological. I'm not interested in, blaming people or pathologizing, their behaviors and all this. Like, how are you individually, in the wrong for this thing? Like, no, that we have all been touched by a world that is in pain, right? We've all been touched by that in some way through our family line, through discrete events that we've been a part of, or particular people that really scarred us. There are reasons why we do the things that we do and why we act the way that we act, why we feel defensive at times, why we struggle with our anger at times, why we struggle with lacking self-worth. I don't think it's because there's something individually wrong with that person, right? Like it is a byproduct of living in the world that we live in, right? And so, like with any of my clients, right, who've had trauma, it's like, okay, the trauma wasn't your fault. And now we have a choice about if we're going to do something about that so that you can live a life that's worth living for yourself, right? That's where we get to have choice, not in the trauma happening. Unfortunately, we didn't get to have a choice in that. If I had a choice in that, I would have picked for you not to have the trauma. 100% every time. I don't care how much you can learn from it. I'd rather you not have the trauma in the first place, right? Unfortunately, that wasn't an option. That's not what we get to control. What we do get to control is how we respond to it, what we do with it now, how we create a life for ourselves that is bigger than the thing that happened to us. That's where we get choice. And that's where I want people to feel so powerful, to feel so empowered, so in control, and able to influence what comes next because of what they choose right now in this moment. That's what I want. And that's why I talk so much about self-sabotage and self-love, because that you can control, right? If the stock market falls, or if your organization just, is like, oh, we're shutting down, or your partner's like, well, I'm leaving you, those things we can't influence but so far. But how I respond to that, how I take care of myself in that moment, how I tend to myself, how I look to give myself what I need, there are options that I have there. So that's the point of that. And so with self-sabotage, it's just really switching our perspective from what's out there, what's external, right? What's in somebody else's hands, and what is in my hands, right? It is in my hands if I believe in myself. It is in my hands if I can remove the mental barriers that I have that make me think, oh, I can't do it, or oh, I'm not enough. Oh, I messed up again. I'm such a failure. I can do something about that. And that's the part, that's the self-sabotage piece that we can massage. We can take a gentle look at, we can move out of the way, and then make more space for something else, something that we want instead. And so we clear that out with doing work in our subconscious mind, really addressing those negative core beliefs that are really tripping us up, harming us, and keeping us from the good that actually is available, but we don't always see right away. So changing that, changing those unconscious contracts, removing that old conditioning around like, what can I do as a woman? What can I do in this part of the world, what's possible for me, removing that old conditioning also then frees up your mind to think more creatively and be like, oh, but what is there for me, right? So we do that work, and then we make sure that we are tuned back into the wisdom of the body and strengthening your intuition. So if you've been silencing that voice of wisdom for a long time, you can start to enhance it with different tools that we use, different practices. And then you're aligning all of your actions, all of your decision making, all the words that come out of your mouth. You're growing more and more in alignment with all those sort of more external behaviors, and making sure they match with your values and what you actually desire. So that's a lot of the hands-on work that I do with folks who are ready for this kind of transformation. And a lot of them are motivated by that idea of legacy. They wanna leave a different kind of legacy, a different kind of picture of what's possible.
Right.
And they care about other people. It's not just all about themselves. The women I work with, they really care. Right. And it's just a matter of finding ways to care and take care of other people without neglecting yourself, because it's so easy for us to do, and we're conditioned, in fact, to do that.
Right,
So.
right. I just want to ask you one last thing before we wrap up as well. The thing that always
Yeah.
comes up when you start to take that journey into self is the accusation of being selfish. So what
Yes.
can you offer, like words or just a little bit of kind of nuggets of wisdom to those who are like, I'm really going to start doing things for me now, but then and especially when you're in the early stages of moving out and you're seeing yourself and you're seeing where you need to go, but it's tentative, it's new, so you're still more here than you are in self, but then you're having to deal with the accusations of selfish because no one wants to hear anyone say that to them. It just sounds like the worst thing. You're selfish, you're leaving people behind. It's like, what can you offer by way of guidance, advice, or tool, anything like that, to help those along who are just going, I'm going to take that step further, but then ways to respond or ways to kind of galvanize yourself when you're having to deal with people that are feeling that you're pulling away now, and the only way that they can kind of get to you is to throw that accusation, to throw that horrible word at you of selfish, because it's no one wants to hear that. But there's the beauty in being selfish, but when you're first stepping out into that space, your heart can't take that kind of word. What can you offer there?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up because it's so true. Everything that you just said right just now is so true. What I would offer is so I'm going to try to be as succinct as possible, right?
Sure.
So, I want you to think of yourself in two different states, right? So think of yourself in the state that you may often find yourself in if you're like many of us. You may often find yourself in the state of being kind of a little bit too stretched, right? Not quite enough sleep, or maybe you got enough, but the quality wasn't great. Um, you skipped a meal because you were too busy. You're running late. You're rushing from one thing to the next because there's no buffer room. You said yes to too many things. So now, the weekend's coming, but you're going to actually get even less rest. Okay. So imagine yourself in that state. And then imagine yourself in this other state. Okay. In the other state, you're rested. You have space between the appointments or the obligations that are on your calendar. You said no to many things in order to say yes to the right things. So you feel more in alignment. You have time to pause and actually connect with your loved ones each day, have connected conversations and be in each other's presence fully. You're getting also downtime that isn't just sleep, but also rest to engage in activities that nourish you, that feel really good for you, that bring you back to yourself, right? Um, so these are two examples, and I could say much more about these two different states of being. But when you're in the first state that I described, are people getting your best? Like when you show up, like if you're leading a meeting or you're, sitting down to dinner with your family, maybe you're not, because in the first date, maybe you're not even sitting down. You're standing up and you guys are rushing out to soccer practice. I don't know, but but like, are they getting your best when you're in that first state of being, right? Because they're probably getting like scraps because you've only given yourself scraps because there was nothing else to give. You didn't have anything else left to give to yourself. And so to me, if we all operated that way, like that would create a very tense, just kind of crunchy situation where no one's really feeling good, right? And no one feels like they're being like really loved up on or really excited. Like everyone's just kind of on edge. But when you're in that second state, the thing that someone's saying is, oh, that's so selfish. You're taking time away to do blah, blah, right? Like, but is anyone getting your best in that second state? And I would argue that probably several people are, including yourself,
Mm.
right? You show up to your appointments, you're fully present, your creative brain is turned on because you've had rest and downtime to replenish. You can love on your lover. You can be with your kids. You can actually show up for your friends' events and support them and be all in. Lots of people are probably getting your best at that point, even though it seems like you're saying no more. But all the things you said yes to, like it's a real yes, you're fully there. So yes, someone might call you selfish. They might think that what you're doing sounds really selfish because they don't understand, right? They're still locked in old conditioning. They're still locked in an old mentality. They don't get it. They genuinely don't. And that's no shame on them because we're not getting taught this stuff in school. Like, where do you go to learn this? You have to choose to learn it, right? So they're still stuck in that old mentality and they don't get it. But the truth is, more people will get the best of you when you do take time to invest in yourself. And that's just, it's irrefutable. So I think just, I want to offer that. Do that exercise for yourself, whoever's listening. What do people get from you when you're in the first date? What do they get from you in experience when you're in the second? And then also, how do you feel? Because just how you feel in each of those states matters too.
Right.
That's very important.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. It's been all about the self today. So it's been great. It just panned out that way. So can you just let everyone know where they can connect with you if you've got things coming up as well?
Yes, yeah. So folks can always follow me on Instagram. That's at Linda Sanderville, MSW. I'm really the only Linda Sanderville that exists on social media. So if you just type in my name, you're going to find me. And then you can also find my podcast as well. You can search for my name. It's called Yourself Liberated. And then my program has just recently opened. My group coaching program, Love Yourself Liberated, is all about supporting women in leadership to dive into this journey. So if you're resonating with what I'm talking about, you can certainly find me on my website, lindasanderville.com, and learn more about that experience there.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, for sharing your wisdom, and thank you for listening. Once again, if you want to join the Flow into 2024 journey, listen into her Inspirations podcast and join the mailing list for the journaling sheets that accompany each episode. All of the links are in the show notes. Also, find me on my website, carolmaywhittick.com, carolmaywhittick.com. You can also link up with me on social media, Carol May Whittick on Instagram and on LinkedIn, and Kazmic, CAZMICK, on Instagram. So until the next episode, have a great week. Speak soon.